They want you to believe these monuments celebrate military victories. But when you compare the blueprints to the timelines, something doesn't add up. We're not looking at memorials, we're looking at components of a unified technical system that someone shut down 200 years ago. Why did architects suddenly install multi-ton copper structures on rooftops, requiring furnaces at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit? Why did Gothic cathedrals, with their metal antenna spires, get completed and restored, all within the same 40-year window? And how is it that ancient temples sit on polygonal stonework that exceeds the engineering capabilities of the 19th century? They explain it away with symbolism and religion, but the evidence points to engineering. Someone was methodically restoring, then deactivating a global energy network. And the biggest question? Why do these portals now stand as dead weight? And where did they actually lead? Open a map of Berlin from 1730. Stop for a second and really look at what you're seeing. The city is surrounded by a perfect star fortress with 18 gates, every bastion calculated down to the degree. Moats 25 to 30 feet deep encircling the walls. Earth ramparts as tall as a 3-story building, protecting the stonework from artillery fire. This is classic 17th, 18th century fortification. Building something like this takes decades of labor and millions of man-hours. Now open a map of the same Berlin, but from 1820. 90 years have passed, and what do you see? Of the 18 gates, only one pair remains, the Brandenburg Gate. Everything else is gone. 17 entry points into the city, 17 massive portals simply ceased to exist. The walls are dismantled, the bastions leveled, the moats filled in. In their place, neat streets, plazas, residential blocks. Historians will show you a pretty fairy tale about how the growing city became too cramped within the old fortifications. They say the population was increasing, trade was expanding, and the fortress walls were hindering development. So they methodically dismantled them, reused the stone for new buildings, beautified the territory. Sounds logical until you start doing the math. Calculate the volume of work yourself. A fortress wall around the capital of a European state. Perimeter length several kilometers. Thickness of the stone foundation 6 to 10 feet. Height 15 to 23 feet along its entire length. This isn't just a fence made of bricks. This is an engineered structure with foundations going 6 to 10 feet into the earth. Let's use a calculator. Assume a wall 3 miles long, average height 20 feet, thickness 8 feet. Simple geometry gives us a volume of 2.6 million cubic feet of masonry. 1 cubic yard of masonry is approximately 500 standard-sized bricks. Multiply that out, 30 million bricks. And that's just the walls, not counting the gates, towers, or interior chambers. Now, think about the logistics of dismantling. Every brick needs to be removed from the mortar, cleaned, loaded onto a cart. An average cart holds 300 to 400 bricks. That's 75,000 carts minimum, each harnessed by 2 horses. You'd need 150,000 horses for simultaneous removal. Or you work for years if you have fewer carts. Where do you transport this material? Where are the traces of quarries, dumps, storage sites? Where are the new buildings in Berlin constructed between 1730 and 1820 using this stone? They don't exist. The most obvious explanation sounds convincing. The stone was reused, documents weren't preserved. Okay, but then find the buildings. Concrete houses, palaces, barracks erected during this period, with notes in the archives, material taken from dismantled fortress walls. Silence. And now, look at what remains. The Brandenburg Gate doesn't stand within a wall. It stands in the middle of open space. These are gates without gates, a portal that leads nowhere. Just 6 massive Doric columns on each side, supporting a horizontal entablature. On that entablature sits a bronze quadriga, an ancient war chariot pulled by 4 horses. Total weight of the composition, several tons. The casting technology requires furnaces exceeding 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit, specialized molds, expertise in copper alloys. We're told these gates were built by architect Carl Gotthard Langhans between 1788 and 1791. 3 years of work, and this was his first major project, his first pancake, as they say. Let's look at this pancake through a magnifying glass. 12 columns total, each carved from a single sandstone monolith. Height 42 feet, diameter 5.7 feet. Weight of one such beast, approximately 40 tons. Simple arithmetic. 12 columns at 40 tons each equals 480 tons just in columns. Officially, this is explained as follows. In the 18th century, technologies already existed for heavy loads, blocks, pulleys, lever systems. Fine. Then show me the logistics, not in words, but in numbers. The nearest suitable sandstone quarry is at least 30 miles from Berlin. Transporting a 40-ton block in the 18th century is an epic undertaking. You need a special platform, reinforced with metal beams, a team of at least 80 horses, a stone-paved road capable of withstanding such load. Travel speed, 2, maximum 3 miles per day. 30 miles from quarry to Berlin. Divide by 2.5 miles per day. That's 12 days to deliver 1 column. Multiply by 12 columns, 150 days of pure movement. And that's just transporting finished blocks. Now, sandstone is relatively soft, but carving a perfectly round column 42 feet tall is no trivial task. Stonemasons work by hand, chisels, hammers, abrasive powders for polishing. One master processes about 1.6 feet of surface per day. The circumference of a column with a diameter of 5.7 feet is 18 feet. Height, 42 feet. Surface area of the lateral surface, approximately 775 square feet. If a master covers 1.6 feet per day, that's 144 working days for 1 column, working alone. If a crew of 10 people, 15 days. For 12 columns with 1 crew, 180 days. And that's just finish work. Now the bas-reliefs. Centaurs fighting humans, Hercules slaying the Hydra, Roman deities Mars and Minerva. Each figure requires the work of a master sculptor. Carving bas-relief in stone isn't the same as modeling clay. Make a mistake by a millimeter, ruin the composition. How many months does it take to create one relief? At optimistic estimates, 2 to 3 months, and there are several scenes. If one master, that's a year to 18 months just on decoration. If many masters, where did dozens of sculptors of this caliber come from? Their names were recorded. They were paid. Are there documents? No, the math doesn't work. And now the most interesting part. We're told that the Brandenburg Gate was inspired by the propylaea of the Athenian Acropolis, an ancient Greek model from the 5th century BC. Architect Langhans supposedly studied ancient Greek architecture and decided to recreate it on Prussian soil. Open any architectural encyclopedia. Look at engravings of the propylaea before the excavations of 1835. What do you see? A pile of stones, ruined columns lying on the ground, pieces of foundation, fragments of ceilings. Archaeologists were reconstructing the layout after the Brandenburg Gate was already completed. Here's the paradox. A German architect in 1788 is copying a Greek original that hasn't yet been excavated, studied, or reconstructed. How did Langhans know the exact proportions? What blueprints did he work from? Official science mumbles something about travels, ancient texts, engravings, but let's be honest. Can you recreate an exact copy of a building down to the millimeter, based on a text description, accounting for all proportions, angles, diameters? Of course not. So either Langhans was a clairvoyant genius, or he was copying not the Greek original, but some other source. A source available in the late 18th century, but one they won't tell you about. Now move from Berlin to St. Petersburg, 1834 to 1838. Architect Vasily Stas erects the Moscow Triumphal Gate. 2 groups of columns, 6 in each, Doric order. Practically the same proportions as the Brandenburg, just slightly more massive. At the top, 6 horses harnessed to a chariot. Officially, these gates were built to honor victory in the Russo-Turkish War of 1828 to 1829, not in honor of Napoleon's defeat, not in memory of Poltava, in honor of a fairly modest conflict with the Ottomans. A strange choice for such a monumental structure, and even stranger that the monument practically copies the Brandenburg model, built 40 years earlier. Expand the geography. Paris, 1806 to 1836. Triumphal Arch at Place de l'Étoile. London, 1826 to 1830. Wellington Arch. Moscow, 1829 to 1834. Triumphal Arch at Tverskaya Zastava. All these structures appear within a 50-year span, from 1800 to 1850, all across Europe, from the Atlantic to the Urals. Different countries, different political systems, but all as if they came out of the same workshop. The same principle, massive columns, Doric order, horizontal entablature, bas-reliefs with classical subjects, and always a quadriga at the top. The handwriting is identical, as if someone distributed a single assignment to architects in different countries. Build an arch. Here are the dimensions. Here's the symbolism. Don't deviate. And one more detail. At the top of almost every monument sits a quadriga or hexaga, bronze casting weighing tons, 4 or 6 horses in dynamic poses. Calculate how many such compositions appeared between 1810 and 1840. Dozens. Bolshoi Theater in Moscow, Narva Gate in Petersburg, General Staff Building, Brandenburg Gate, Triumphal Arch in Moscow. Each weighs 3 to 7 tons. Casting technology requires enormous furnaces, specialized molds, precise alloy calculations. One quadriga, months of work. And here's what's interesting. Look closer at the quadriga of the Brandenburg Gate. It was cast in 1793 in Berlin. But 12 years later, in 1806, Napoleon captured Berlin and took the quadriga to Paris as war booty. It was only returned in 1814 after the defeat of the French. They allegedly replaced the figure of the goddess Irene with the goddess of victory, Victoria, and added a Prussian eagle. An entertaining story, but here's the question: why did Napoleon need this particular quadriga? He captured dozens of cities across Europe, saw hundreds of monuments. Why? Why did he choose precisely the Berlin composition and export it to Paris? Perhaps because this wasn't just a decorative element, but a key component of the system. An element without which the portal doesn't work. And Napoleon knew this perfectly well. Now look at all the other quadrigas. They appear precisely during Napoleon's period of activity and immediately after his defeat, as if after the wars someone was restoring the system, putting back removed elements or installing new control markers. Historians usually say this is a symbol of victory, an ancient tradition borrowed through the centuries, but then explain this simple thing. During the Renaissance, when European culture fanatically copied everything ancient, the quadriga is practically absent. Not on the palaces of Florence, not on the cathedrals of Venice, not on the banks of Amsterdam. Isolated cases, no more. But after 1810, they multiply as if on command. In 30 years, there are more than in the previous 300. This isn't coincidence. This is a marker, a stamp of a unified system placed on key objects.
Let's return to Berlin. Church of St. Nikolai, Nikolaikirche, officially considered the oldest temple, founded in the 13th century. Today, 2 Gothic towers, 295 feet tall, perfect symmetry, sharp spires. Look at a photograph from 1827, a completely different building. One tower finished, the other truncated. The asymmetrical church looks crippled. We're told that in 1878 they found the money to complete it. For 5 centuries they couldn't finish, but then it was suddenly resolved. At first glance, it seems logical. After the unification of Germany, the state invested in Gothic heritage, national uplift, patriotism. But look at the stele. Cologne Cathedral, laid supposedly in 1428, stood unfinished for 600 years. In 1842 to 1880, it suddenly completed. Milan Cathedral, the same story. Notre Dame Cathedral undergoes major restoration in 1844 to 1864. See the pattern? All Gothic cathedrals are completed in the period from 1840 to 1880, synchronously, as if someone gave an order to restore a network of objects of a specific type. Right now, many will write, this is 19th century Romanticism, interest in the Middle Ages, desire to revive Gothic. Fine, but then answer one question. Why such concentration specifically on spires? Why are all restorations focused on vertical elements? A Gothic spire isn't decoration, it's a complex structure, a sharp metal rod ascending into the sky for dozens of meters, often made of several sections connected by bolts. At the top, a cross with multiple rays directed in different directions. The form perfectly replicates an antenna. Vertical conductor, grounding through the tower, receiving elements at the top. Remember physics. A lightning rod, a tall metal rod, attracts discharges from the atmosphere and diverts them into the ground. But what if the purpose of the spires was the opposite? Not to divert energy, but to collect it. The cathedral dome, an ideal resonator. The metal shell creates shielding. The spire serves as a receiving antenna.
The entire structure functions as an energy station powered by atmospheric electricity, the system Tesla talked about and which was erased from the textbooks. Look at the details. Many Gothic cathedrals have metal spires covered in copper or gold leaf. Copper, an excellent conductor. Gold, even better. At the top, not a simple cross, but a complex structure of several metal elements directed at different angles. This isn't symbolism, this is an antenna array. Inside the tower, beneath the spire, are often bells, large bronze bells weighing tons. Their ringing creates powerful sound vibrations, specific frequencies, and sound is also a wave, capable of resonating with metal structures and amplifying the effect. The walls of Gothic cathedrals are permeated with metal tie rods. You can see them outside, characteristic X-shaped crosses or stars of metal on the facades. Officially, these are reinforcements, preventing the walls from spreading. But metal elements inside stone masonry create a conducting network throughout the entire building.
The floors of cathedrals are often laid with metal-bearing rocks, granite with quartz inclusions, marble with veins. Under the floor, crypts, basements going deep into the earth, system grounding. All this together forms a single electrical circuit. The spire collects atmospheric electricity. The dome concentrates it. Metal tie rods distribute it throughout the building. Bells create resonance, grounding through crypts. In 1840, 1880, these antennas were being restored. Someone was trying to restart the system or preserve its elements under the guise of restoration. Let's return to Berlin as a star fortress. The 1820 map shows walls already partially dismantled. Why build a powerful fortification in the 1730s, only to dismantle it half a century later? The logistics of construction required tens of thousands of workers, millions of bricks, hundreds of thousands of tons of earth for ramparts. This is a project for decades, and all for the sake of starting dismantling half a century later? The alternative, the walls weren't built in the 18th century. They were already there. They were buried during the mud flows of the 1760s to 1780s. What they call dismantling is actually excavation. The Brandenburg Gate is what they were able to clear and rename. Gates in the structure of a star fortress aren't just entry points, they're nodes, key elements of the system. The geometry of the star isn't random. The bastions are positioned to create specific angles, specific resonances. We're told the star shape is needed for defense. Protruding angles allow firing along the walls without leaving dead zones. From a military standpoint, it's logical. But look at the complexity. To build a perfect star, you need the most precise calculations. An error in angle by 1 degree and the system doesn't work. In the 17th and 18th centuries, when instruments were primitive, creating such precision was extremely difficult. Nevertheless, star fortresses stand all over the world. From Scandinavia to Indonesia, from America to Siberia, everywhere the same principle, similar geometry, identical angles. Open maps and see for yourself. Fort Bourtange in the Netherlands, absolutely symmetrical 5-pointed star. Peter and Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg, 6-pointed star with perfect angles. Fort Jefferson in Florida, hexagonal star on an island in the middle of the ocean. Hamina Fortress in Finland, 8-pointed star. Palmanova Fortress in Italy.
all built supposedly in the 17th, 18th centuries, all with ideal geometry, all as if drawn by one hand. The official explanation, the Dutch school of fortification. Military engineers shared knowledge, plans traveled between countries. But look at the synchronicity. These objects appear almost simultaneously on different continents, before the telegraph, before rapid communication. How did builders in Siberia know the exact proportions being used in the Netherlands? Either there was a global communication system we're not told about, or these fortresses were built by someone who already had unified blueprints and global coordination. And one more thing they can't explain. Beneath many temples and gates, you'll find polygonal masonry, massive stone blocks fitted together without mortar, with such precision that you can't insert a blade between them. We see this at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, at ancient Greek temples, at foundations beneath Gothic cathedrals, and beneath the pedestals of triumphal arches. The technology of polygonal masonry exceeds 19th century capabilities. These aren't rough blocks, these are computer precision cuts, where each stone is a unique shape and they all interlock like a 3D puzzle. 19th century architects didn't build on these foundations, they built on top of them. They found them, cleared them, and erected their structures above, and then wrote in the archives, ancient temple foundations preserved. They preserved them because they didn't know how to recreate them. Look at the construction documents of any major 19th century project, cathedral restoration, triumphal arch erection. You'll see detailed expense reports, so many bricks purchased, so much copper, so many workers employed, but you won't find a single document explaining how they created polygonal masonry. Because they didn't create it, they found it. The system existed before, a global network of energy nodes connected by star fortresses, marked by gates, portals, amplified by cathedral antennas. Someone built it using technology we lost. Then something happened, a cataclysm, a war, a deliberate shutdown. The system went offline. In the 19th century, during the period of restorations, someone tried to reactivate it, or maybe they were deliberately decommissioning it, disguising control points as monuments and memorials. And here's what's interesting. The same pattern operates today. Look at modern monuments, obelisks in capital cities, always in the center, always with specific geometry, arches on central squares, metal sculptures on government buildings. They tell you it's art, culture, historical memory, but pay attention to the materials, metal, specific alloys. Pay attention to the geometry, always precise angles, specific proportions. Pay attention to the locations, intersection points, energy nodes. The system hasn't disappeared. It's been repurposed. The old portals stand deactivated, turned into tourist attractions, but the new markers continue to appear, following the same blueprint. Let's return to the quadrigas. Why specifically 4 or 6 horses? Why not 3? Not 5. 4 horses, 6 horses. These are specific numbers. In ancient numerology, 4 represents the material world, earthly elements. 6 represents harmony, balance, the connection between earthly and celestial. But in electrical engineering, these numbers also matter. 4 conductors for certain types of current distribution. 6 for others. The quadriga isn't symbolism, It's a technical schematic encoded in bronze. When Napoleon took the Berlin Quadriga, he wasn't collecting trophies, he was removing a component. When it was returned in 1814 and modified, they weren't adding patriotic symbols, they were recalibrating the system. Every detail matters: the position of the horses, the angle of the chariot, the figure of the driver. It's all specifications disguised as art. So here's what we know. Between 1800 and 1850, across Europe and beyond, dozens of identical structures appeared. Triumphal arches with bronze quadrigas, Gothic cathedrals with restored spires, star fortresses with specific geometry. The official narrative says coincidence, cultural exchange, national pride. But the evidence says coordinated effort, unified design, technical purpose. Walls that supposedly took decades to build were dismantled in years, leaving no trace of the material. Gates that should have protected cities were left standing alone, leading nowhere. Cathedrals that stood incomplete for centuries were suddenly finished within the same 40-year window. And the technology beneath it all, polygonal masonry, precision bronze casting, massive stone transportation, exceeds what 19th century records claim was possible. Someone knew what these structures really were. Someone had the blueprints, the coordination, the resources to restore or deactivate them globally. The question isn't whether this network existed. The evidence proves it did. The question is, who controlled it? What was it for? And why did they shut it down? They've turned the portals into monuments, the antennas into churches, the nodes into tourist sites. They want you to see symbols and history. But once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. These weren't memorials, they were machinery. And someone doesn't want you asking where the power went.